are having to sacrifice not buying the food that is important for families, the food that's necessary to keep families healthy, and instead are worried about how much it costs.
Well, that was NDP leader Jagmeet Singh in Montreal today, unimpressed with the Trudeau government's plans and promises to cut food prices. The government has talked about price freezes, price matching. They had a big meeting with Canada's grocery chain. Some analysts say much of that is really nothing new. But the plan is short on specifics. Details on when exactly we're going to see savings are kind of vague. It's become a big political issue, too, for the government. They're getting attacked by the NDP for being out of touch with average Canadians. And the Conservatives preparing to release this ad we're about to show you today on Thanksgiving food prices. Take a look.
What does it cost to have Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh at the head of the Thanksgiving dinner table? As their inflationary taxes punish the farmers who bring us food, peas now cost you 22% more.
And on it goes. Let's bring in the front bench. Miriam Monsef is a former Liberal cabinet minister, nowadays CEO of Onward. Melanie Paradis, the communications director for former Conservative leader Erin O'Toole, nowadays president of Texture Communications. Happy to have Kathleen Monk joining us, the communications director for the late NDP leader Jack Layton. She's now the principal owner of Monk and Associates. And our very own Rachel Aiello. She's the senior digital parliamentary reporter at CTV News, often our eyes and ears up on the Hill, and she does a great job of it. Melanie, let me start with you. What's the deal here on this promise to cut grocery prices, and whether you think there's anything that's going to really happen on that?
So we've got data gathering, we've got a task force that's been struck, and a code of conduct. We are a royal commission short of the Ottawa royal flush here. None of this is going to accomplish anything. Unfortunately, this is just a press release of items that the government is rolling out right before Thanksgiving, none of which is going to help lower prices at the grocery store right when Canadians need it the most.
Kathleen Monk, your take.
Yeah, I tend to agree with what Melanie's saying. Listen, the Liberals have done very little over the last 21 months as grocery prices continue to kind of scale upwards and upwards and upwards. And they scrambled, frankly, after the summer, and then called those CEOs on the mat, kind of perp walked them, if you will, through the House of Commons. And really their plan isn't really, to do much. They're asking Canadians essentially to price match and look at flyers, but they could have actually policy matched. They could have policy matched the NDP, which have been pushing for a windfall tax, frankly, on the big grocers. Essentially, a lot of the big five grocers are essentially oligarchs in our country. There's not a lot of competition. They take the vast majority of the market, and they've been proven to be bad actors in the past. And what I mean by that, qualifying it, is they have done bread fixing in the past. We know that they've done wage suppression collusion in the past. And so we know that they've acted as bad actors in the past. And so we need some mechanism at the federal level where we can actually have a tool that sifts through what their profits are and what they're actually charging Canadians, and if they need to be charging at that level. And that's hopefully what the Competition Act changes can do.
Miriam, one of the big arguments of the NDP is that the Trudeau government is, quote, asking nicely, these CEOs of the grocery chains to get on board. Is it time to get tougher here, a lot tougher?
I think this is a beginning of what we will likely see, and what I hope to see is 18 months of relentless execution on behalf of this government to address the affordability crisis in Canada in tangible ways. And absolutely, food security, or rather insecurity, is top of mind for Canadians, but so is housing. So I think, part of that royal flush that Melanie was talking about, an item left out there is legislation that's before the House right now that wisely pairs housing and food security together. And it is wise for grocers and retailers to accept this call for action from the government and show tangible results. It's also wise for the government to move forward like they did with Vaughan, with tens of thousands of housing units, to show that not only are they hearing the call for action from Canadians to address the high costs of food, but they're moving further and consistently and aggressively to address housing affordability and unattainability. So, shout out, by the way, to Sean Fraser, who's showing that he's understanding this, and shout out to Francois-Philippe Champagne, who helped the leader of the Conservative Party find a $30 turkey when he was, clearly being gouged with a $120 turkey that he spoke often about in the House of Commons.
Yeah, that happening on Thursday. It was a pretty funny exchange between the two. To you, Rachel Aiello, how much pressure is the Trudeau government under here on this issue?
I think tremendous pressure. We saw that ad the Conservatives are rolling out. The timing, though, on that I'm a bit questionable on. I think they probably could have rolled out something pointing to people's grocery prices heading into Thanksgiving before this weekend. But I think they are feeling pressure here, Todd, because as Miriam had said, they're at the starting point here. This is, the start of months of promises coming from them when realistically Canadians have been feeling the pinch at the grocery checkout for years. And so I think they are a bit behind the curve and a bit behind public opinion on tackling these issues. It's the same on their housing front, Todd. They're talking about, the first plank of their housing plan. You're going to see more and more and more and more. And I think the question now that they're facing is, why did it take so long to realize you need to act? And what more are we going to see beyond, as Melanie pointed out there, kind of a word salad from Minister Champagne earlier this week?
Yeah, there really has been, Melanie, a full court press going on, as Rachel's pointing out. It seems like almost every day there's an announcement about prices. There's an announcement about housing. We see Sean Fraser, the housing minister. We see François-Philippe Champagne, the industry minister. We see the deputy prime minister and the prime minister coming out over and over again. They know they're under fire by the Conservatives and the NDP over this. When it comes to the grocery stores, though, this is such a tangible thing for Canadians. Very concrete. You go in, you pay a certain price for a product, you realize it's gone up or it's not gone up, as the case may be. And if your government's fortunes are tied to that, it can be pretty risky because, of course, we live in a market economy. There's only so much the government can actually do. They can't say to the grocery stores, listen, you got to cut milk by $1.
Right. And I just wanted to touch back on the ad that the Conservatives put out today is actually perfectly timed, I think, because this is the conversation that all Canadians are going to be having around their Thanksgiving dinner table this weekend, especially those Canadians who are having that dinner without a turkey, unfortunately. The costs are through the roof, and it's been really challenging for a lot of families to make ends meet. And I think families are trying to get really creative this Thanksgiving. I know our family, we're having company over and we're doing more of a potluck style dinner so that everyone can save because prices are so high.
Yeah, to you, Kathleen Monk, and Jagmeet Singh going to Papineau, which is the Prime Minister's riding in Montreal, to attack him over grocery prices and cost of living and affordability, basically saying that the government is out of touch on this. When it comes to those pocketbook issues, they can decide elections.
They certainly can. And in the past, we used to say that, Conservatives held the polling advantage on the economy. But the economy is more broken up now when we look at it polling. It's actually broken up into personal affordability and jobs and the economy that way, not only the macro economy. So I do think that right now, obviously, the Conservatives have a bit of an advantage of this. They've been speaking about these prices in the House relentlessly. The ad campaign is a natural extension of that messaging that Pierre Poilievre has been so effective at delivering. But I also want to say that I think the Liberals made a misstep here. In September, when the House returned and they rolled out this plan with the CEOs, they were the ones that tied it to Thanksgiving. They were the ones that tied it to this family event that's surrounded by food. It's harvest time. It's the one time where you can have a nice celebration around food with your family where there's not that kind of pressure of gifts or other things going on. And so people tend to enjoy it and they tend to want to indulge. And so they will remember if the turnip, and I don't love turnip, I have to admit, is more expensive than last year, or the turkey is outrageous, or sweet potatoes, I read today, are up 40% over last year. So they're going to remember that. And I think this was a real issues management misstep on behalf of the Liberals in terms of tying it to this specific date and actually giving Canadians the chance to actually price match, actually look at their bills themselves and basically challenge the Liberals on them delivering or not.
Miriam, what do you think? Was it a misstep to tie it to Thanksgiving?
I think it's smart to time every single action, every single promise. One, to measure it, and two, to time it. And if those two things aren't happening, it's not going to get done. I think it's wise for all parties in the House moving forward when the House comes back to passed the legislation focused on affordability, both food and housing. And if the Conservatives in this instance vote against this legislation, I hope that the Liberals will pick that up and remind Canadians that time and time again, when the rhetoric is we care about Canadians, they have the best slogans and they have millions of dollars to spend on advertising. But when it comes time to action and actually supporting Canadians when they're hurting, they do not follow through. And so I really hope that they move forward on that. I also hope, and I imagine this conversation's happening between Liberal MPs and ministers and the Prime Minister, that it's going to be unpleasant for them politically for the next while, but they've got to just keep their heads down and keep pushing and keep being bold and brave and making these changes that need to happen so that Canadians can feel some relief over the next year and a bit, so that perhaps come the next election, they will remember that times were tough, but these folks stepped up for them and they can be trusted to do so for one more term.
Rachel, you expect the Conservatives to really try and capitalize on this strategy they've been rolling out in the last couple of weeks and months and just use Thanksgiving perhaps as a springboard further into the fall?
For sure. But I think this ad specifically, Todd, probably could have come out a little bit before, just because I think most Canadians would have likely done their Thanksgiving meal planning and grocery shopping before this weekend. But I wouldn't be surprised, I guess I would say, to see a similar one, I don't know, come Christmas. Whatever the cost going rate of turkey is by then, I guess we'll all wait with bated breath to find out, and what discount version the Liberals can find to throw back in their face. It was a bit of turkey talk, I think, on Parliament Hill this week around this issue, and whether it's specifically because everyone wanted to find that tangible thing. Everyone is getting ready for Thanksgiving. It's an easy thing to talk about. Canadians can understand. But as Kathleen pointed out, it kind of goes both ways. People are then going to their dinner mindful of this conversation. And depending on how they feel about it, whichever message they heard in the House of Commons would be resonating.
Yeah, very relatable. All right, we're going to get our front bench to stick around because